The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of the Veterans Affairs office in San Diego as Sarah Martinez adjusted her worn leather jacket and walked toward the entrance. Her weathered hands, scarred from years of combat operations, gripped the manila folder containing her discharge papers and medical records. At 52, Sarah carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the worst humanity could offer and survived to tell the tale. Inside the folder lay documents that would shock most people. Navy SEAL Team 6. Multiple deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, and classified locations. Distinguished Service Cross. Purple Heart with 3 oak leaf clusters. But Sarah had learned long ago that credentials on paper meant nothing when people couldn't see past their own preconceptions. The VA office buzzed with typical morning activity. Veterans lined up at various counters, some in wheelchairs, others leaning on canes, all seeking assistance with benefits, medical care, or disability claims. Sarah took her place in line behind a young Marine who couldn't have been more than 25, his left leg ending just below the knee. "Ma'am, you're in the wrong line," a gruff voice called from behind the counter. The clerk, a middle-aged man with a permanent scowl, gestured dismissively. "This is for combat veterans only. General inquiries are over there." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained calm. "I'm exactly where I need to be. Combat veteran, multiple deployments." The clerk's eyes narrowed as he looked her up and down. "Right, and I'm the Pope. Lady, I've been working here 15 years. I know a combat veteran when I see one, and you ain't it." The young Marine in front of Sarah turned around, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Other veterans in line began to take notice of the exchange, some shuffling uncomfortably, others leaning in to listen. Sarah opened her folder and placed her DD-214 discharge form on the counter. "Here's my documentation." The clerk barely glanced at it before sliding it back. "These can be faked easy enough. You wouldn't believe how many people come in here with phony papers trying to get benefits they don't deserve." "I suggest you look more carefully," Sarah said, her voice carrying a steel edge that made the Marine step back slightly. "I don't need to look carefully at anything, lady. You think you can waltz in here with some fake SEAL papers and fool me? I've seen real SEALs. They don't look like soccer moms." The comment hit the room like a physical blow. Conversation stopped. Veterans turned to stare. The young Marine's face flushed with embarrassment for Sarah, though he didn't understand why. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more authority than a shout. "Son, you have no idea what you're dealing with. I suggest you call your supervisor." "My supervisor?" The clerk laughed harshly. "My supervisor's going to tell you the same thing I am. We don't tolerate stolen valor here. Matter of fact, I think we need to call the police. What you're doing is a federal crime." Sarah's eyes flashed, but she maintained her composure. "You want to call the police? Go ahead. But you might want to reconsider." The clerk was already reaching for his phone. "Oh, I'm calling all right. We take this stuff seriously here. You military wannabes make me sick, pretending you served when real heroes are suffering." The young Marine finally found his voice. "Sir, maybe you should just look at her papers." "Stay out of this, son," the clerk snapped. "This is exactly the kind of thing that disrespects your service." Within 20 minutes, 2 police officers arrived. Officer Johnson, a tall African-American man in his 30s, approached the counter with his partner, Officer Williams, a smaller white woman with sharp eyes. "What seems to be the problem here?" Johnson asked. The clerk launched into his explanation, gesturing dramatically at Sarah. "This woman came in here with fake military papers, claiming to be a Navy SEAL. She's committing stolen valor, trying to get benefits she doesn't deserve." Officer Williams examined Sarah's paperwork while Johnson spoke with the clerk. Williams's eyebrows rose slightly as she read, but her expression remained neutral. "Ma'am," Johnson addressed Sarah, "do you have any other identification?" Sarah handed over her driver's license and military ID card. Johnson studied them carefully, comparing the photos and checking for signs of tampering. "These look authentic to me," Williams said quietly to her partner. "That's what they want you to think," the clerk interrupted. "But I'm telling you, There's no way this woman is a Navy SEAL. Look at her. Johnson's patience was clearly wearing thin. Sir, I need you to step back and let us handle this. Sarah remained silent through the entire exchange, watching the situation unfold with the patience of someone who had waited in far more dangerous places for far worse outcomes. Ma'am, Johnson said, turning back to Sarah, I'm going to need you to step outside with us for a moment while we sort this out. Am I under arrest? Sarah asked calmly. Johnson hesitated. We just need to verify your identity and get to the bottom of this complaint. Sarah nodded and followed the officers outside. Several veterans from inside had drifted out to watch, including the young Marine, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. In the parking lot, Williams pulled Johnson aside for a whispered conversation. Sarah could see Williams pointing to something on the paperwork, her expression serious. The thing is, Johnson said, returning to Sarah, these documents, if they're fake, are really good fakes. But we got to investigate the complaint. I understand you're doing your job, Sarah replied. But I'd suggest you make some phone calls before this goes any further. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. The young Marine took a step forward. Officers, wait. Maybe you should. Sir, please step back, Williams ordered. As Johnson pulled out his handcuffs, Sarah shook her head slowly. You're making a mistake. Ma'am, please don't resist. We're just going to detain you while we verify your identity. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around Sarah's wrists. Several veterans in the parking lot began shouting objections, but the officers waved them back. This is wrong, the young Marine called out. You should check with the Pentagon or something. We'll sort it all out at the station, Johnson said, though he looked increasingly uncertain about the arrest. As they walked toward the patrol car, Sarah maintained her dignity despite the humiliation. She had endured far worse than this, though the disrespect stung in a way that enemy bullets never could. The clerk had come outside and was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on his face. Should have thought twice before trying to steal valor from real heroes, he called out. Sarah turned her head slightly toward him. Real heroes don't need to prove themselves to people like you. As Johnson opened the rear door of the patrol car, Williams suddenly grabbed his arm. Wait, she said urgently. I just realized something about these papers. She was holding Sarah's DD 214, studying it intently. Look at this deployment record. Operation Red Wings. Operation Neptune Spear. These aren't just any SEAL operations. Johnson paused, one hand on Sarah's shoulder, the other on the car door. What do you mean? I mean, if these are fake, whoever made them knows classified details that shouldn't be public knowledge. The crowd of veterans had grown larger, and their murmurs were becoming more agitated. The young Marine was now openly arguing with the VA clerk, whose confidence was beginning to waver as he overheard the officer's conversation. Ma'am, Williams said to Sarah, what unit did you serve with exactly? DevGru, Sarah replied simply. What most people call SEAL Team 6. Williams went pale. Johnson, we need to make some calls before we go anywhere. Why? What's DevGru? It's... Williams lowered her voice. It's the most elite unit in the military. The ones that got bin Laden. Johnson looked from Williams to Sarah, uncertainty creeping into his expression. Are you saying she might actually be? I'm saying we better find out for sure before we do something we'll regret. The VA clerk was now standing closer, trying to overhear the conversation. His earlier confidence had completely evaporated as he noticed the officer's changed demeanor. Sarah stood quietly beside the patrol car, still handcuffed, watching the situation develop. She had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than words, and sometimes the best action was patience. Williams, Johnson said finally, called dispatch. Have them contact Naval Special Warfare Command. I want verification on these records before we go any further. As Williams pulled out her radio, the crowd of veterans began to murmur more loudly. Word was spreading that something significant was happening, though most didn't understand exactly what. The young Marine approached the officers cautiously. Excuse me, but did she really serve with the team that got bin Laden? Williams looked at him seriously. That's what we're trying to find out. The VA clerk had gone very quiet, the color draining from his face as the implications of his accusations began to sink in. He had spent the last hour publicly humiliating someone who might be one of America's most elite warriors. Sarah remained motionless beside the patrol car, her eyes scanning the growing crowd with the automatic situational awareness that never left operators like her. Even in handcuffs, even facing false accusations, she maintained the quiet professionalism that had carried her through the world's most dangerous missions. The radio crackled to life as dispatch responded to Williams's request. "We're patching you through to NSW Command now. Stand by." In the distance, another vehicle was approaching the VA office. A black sedan with government plates, moving with the purposeful speed of someone who had received an urgent call. The validation Sarah had been waiting for was finally coming, though she wondered if the damage to her dignity could ever truly be repaired. She had faced down terrorists in caves and compound raids without flinching, but being handcuffed outside a VA office by people who doubted her service cut deeper than any combat wound. The radio hissed with static as a new voice came through, crisp and authoritative. The conversation that followed would change everything. The voice that crackled through Officer Williams's radio carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "This is Rear Admiral Robert Hastings, Naval Special Warfare Command. I understand you have questions about one of our personnel." Williams exchanged glances with Johnson, both officers suddenly aware that this situation had escalated far beyond a simple stolen valor case. The crowd of veterans had grown to nearly 30 people, all watching the drama unfold in the VA parking lot. "Admiral, this is Officer Williams, San Diego PD. We have a woman here claiming to be former DevGru, and we need verification of her service record." "What's her name?" The Admiral's voice was sharp, urgent. "Sarah Martinez, service number." Williams read the information from the DD, 214. There was a long pause on the radio, long enough that Williams began to wonder if the connection had been lost. When the Admiral's voice returned, it carried a weight that made everyone within earshot lean closer. "Officer Williams, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're currently detaining one of the most decorated warriors in the history of naval special warfare. Sarah Martinez, call sign Phoenix, served 12 years with DevGru. She participated in operations that will remain classified for the next 50 years. Remove those handcuffs immediately." The parking lot fell silent except for the static of the radio. Johnson's hand moved automatically toward his keys, but he hesitated, looking at Williams for confirmation. "Sir," Williams said into the radio, "can you verify that for us? We have a complainant here who says..." "Officer," the Admiral's voice cut through her words like a blade, "I don't care what anyone says. Sarah Martinez saved my life in Helmand Province in 2011. She carried 3 wounded SEALs out of a Taliban ambush under heavy fire. She has more combat decorations than most entire units. If she's in handcuffs, you have exactly 30 seconds to fix that before this becomes an international incident." Johnson was already moving, pulling out his keys and approaching Sarah. His hand shook slightly as he unlocked the cuffs. I'm so sorry. We had no idea." Sarah rubbed her wrists where the metal had bitten into her skin, her expression unreadable. "Apology accepted, officer. You were responding to a complaint and following protocol." The VA clerk had backed up against the building wall, his face ashen. The young Marine was staring at Sarah with open admiration, while other veterans in the crowd began approaching her with obvious respect. "There's more." Admiral Hastings' voice continued through the radio. "I'm currently en route to your location. ETA, 5 minutes. I suggest you secure the area and ensure Ms. Martinez receives the respect she's earned." Williams looked around the parking lot nervously. "Sir, what do you mean secure the area?" "I mean that woman you just had in handcuffs is about to receive the Navy Cross for actions that happened last year in Syria. The ceremony was supposed to be classified, but given the circumstances, I think we can make an exception." The crowd erupted in murmurs and gasps. The Navy Cross was the second highest decoration for valor, awarded only for extraordinary heroism in combat. Most people went their entire military careers without even meeting someone who had received one. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, then opened them to stare directly at the VA clerk who had started this entire situation. Still think my papers are fake? The clerk couldn't meet her gaze. He mumbled something inaudible and tried to retreat further into the building, but the crowd of veterans blocked his path. "Ma'am," the young Marine said, approaching Sarah hesitantly, "I'm sorry this happened to you. What they did was wrong." Sarah studied his face, noting the pain in his eyes that had nothing to do with his missing leg. "What's your name, Marine?" "Corporal Danny Rodriguez, ma'am. 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. Afghanistan." "Yes, ma'am. Helmand Province, 2023. Sarah nodded. "Tough deployment." "IED." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "Yes, ma'am. Lost 3 guys in my squad that day. Survivor's guilt is a heavy load, Corporal. You carrying that around?" Rodriguez looked surprised by her directness. "Some days are harder than others, ma'am. I lost teammates, too. Good people. The guilt tries to eat you alive if you let it." Sarah's voice softened slightly. "But you're here, you're alive, and that means you have work left to do. Honor their sacrifice by living well." Before Rodriguez could respond, the black sedan Admiral Hastings had been traveling and pulled into the parking lot. The car moved with official purpose, its government plates reflecting the afternoon sun. The sedan came to a stop near the growing crowd, and the rear door opened. The man who emerged was tall and lean, wearing a dress blue uniform decorated with enough ribbons to cover most of his chest. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, and his bearing commanded immediate attention from everyone present. Admiral Hastings's eyes swept the crowd until they found Sarah. His expression shifted from official concern to something approaching relief and warmth. "Phoenix," he called out, using her call sign as he approached. "I got here as fast as I could." The crowd parted automatically as the Admiral walked directly to Sarah. Without hesitation, he embraced her in a bear hug that surprised everyone watching. "Robert," Sarah said quietly, "you didn't have to come all the way down here." "Like hell I didn't," Admiral Hastings replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "When I got word that someone had put you in handcuffs for stolen valor, I dropped everything." He turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who had commanded thousands of sailors and Marines in combat. "I want everyone here to understand something," the Admiral announced. "The woman standing beside me has served this country with distinction for 12 years. She has been wounded in combat 4 times. She has saved the lives of countless Americans, both military and civilian. She has participated in operations that helped keep every single one of you safe while you slept in your beds." The VA clerk tried to slip away unnoticed, but Admiral Hastings's sharp eyes caught the movement. "You," the Admiral said, pointing directly at the clerk. "Are you the one who accused her of stolen valor?" The clerk's face went from pale to red and back to pale again. "Sir, she didn't look like... I was just trying to protect." "What's your name?" "Gerald Kowalski, sir. I work for the VA." Admiral Hastings walked directly to Kowalski, stopping just inches from his face. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried clearly across the parking lot. "Mr. Kowalski, let me educate you about the woman you humiliated today. Sarah Martinez was part of the operation that eliminated the terrorist cell responsible for the 2019 embassy bombing in Afghanistan. She spent 6 months undercover in Pakistan, gathering intelligence that prevented 3 major attacks on American soil. She was wounded twice in Syria while extracting American hostages from ISIS captivity." Kowalski seemed to shrink with each word the Admiral spoke. "But more than that," Admiral Hastings continued, "she embodies everything this country stands for. Courage under fire, loyalty to her teammates, service above self. While you were sitting behind your comfortable desk, she was crawling through caves, hunting down the people who want to kill you and your family." The crowd of veterans was now completely silent, hanging on every word. Several were recording the exchange with their phones. Admiral Hastings turned back to Sarah. "The reason I came here personally is because I have something that belongs to you." He reached into his uniform jacket and pulled out a small blue box. The crowd recognized it immediately, the distinctive packaging of a major military decoration. This was supposed to be presented in a classified ceremony next week, the Admiral said, opening the box to reveal the star-shaped medal inside. But I think these circumstances call for a change of venue. Sarah's composure finally cracked slightly, her eyes widening as she saw the Navy Cross nestled in its blue velvet box. The citation reads, Admiral Hastings announced, his voice carrying across the parking lot, for extraordinary heroism while serving with Naval Special Warfare Development Group during combat operations in Syria. Petty Officer Martinez repeatedly exposed herself to enemy fire to evacuate wounded civilians and military personnel. Her actions directly resulted in the preservation of 17 American lives and prevented the capture of classified materials by hostile forces. The Admiral removed the medal from its box and stepped forward to pin it to Sarah's jacket. The crowd of veterans erupted in spontaneous applause, many with tears in their eyes. Furthermore, Admiral Hastings continued after the applause died down, I want everyone here to know that Sarah Martinez's service record includes commendations from the President, the Secretary of Defense, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She has been personally thanked by the families of dozens of Americans whose lives she saved. Officer Johnson approached the group hesitantly. Admiral, I want to apologize on behalf of the San Diego Police Department. We were responding to a complaint and should have verified the information more thoroughly. Admiral Hastings studied the officer for a moment. Officer Johnson, you and your partner were doing your jobs. The fault here lies with someone who made accusations without understanding what he was talking about. His gaze moved back to Kowalski, who was now visibly trembling. Mr. Kowalski, the Admiral said, I want you to understand something. This woman has given more to this country than most people could give in 10 lifetimes. She has scars that will never heal, memories that will never fade, and she carries the weight of classified operations that she can never talk about. And you had her arrested because she didn't look like your idea of a warrior. Kowalski finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. Sir, I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Yes, you did. Admiral Hastings agreed. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Kowalski could answer, Sarah stepped forward. Admiral, with your permission, I'd like to say something. Admiral Hastings nodded and stepped back slightly. Sarah looked around the crowd of veterans, her gaze settling on each face for a moment before moving to the next. Mr. Kowalski made a mistake today, but it wasn't entirely his fault. As warriors, we sometimes forget that our service isn't always visible on the outside. We carry our battles inside us, and not everyone can see the cost of what we've done. She turned to look directly at Kowalski. You were wrong to assume I was lying. You were wrong to have me arrested. But you were right about one thing. Stolen valor is a real problem, and it does disrespect the sacrifice of genuine veterans. The crowd murmured their agreement. The difference is, Sarah continued, real veterans don't need to prove themselves to anyone. Our service speaks for itself, and the people we saved, the missions we completed, and the brothers and sisters who came home alive because of what we did. Admiral Hastings smiled proudly as Sarah spoke, recognizing the leadership qualities that had made her such an effective operator. Moving forward, Sarah said, I hope everyone here remembers that service comes in many forms. It doesn't always look like what you expect, and it's not always worn on the outside. Judge people by their actions, not their appearance. The young Marine, Rodriguez, raised his hand tentatively. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Sarah nodded. How do you deal with people not understanding what you've been through? Sarah's expression softened as she looked at the young veteran. The same way you deal with losing your teammates. Corporal, you remember that their understanding isn't what validates your service. Your service speaks for itself. The people you saved, the missions you completed, the fact that you're standing here today, that's what matters. Admiral Hastings checked his watch. I'm afraid I have to head back to base, but before I go, I want to make something clear to everyone here. He turned to address the entire crowd of veterans. Each of you served this country with honor. Each of you made sacrifices. Some of you bear visible wounds. Others carry invisible ones. But you all answered the call when your nation needed you. Don't let anyone diminish that service, and don't diminish each other's service by making assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't. The Admiral shook hands with several veterans in the crowd before returning to Sarah. Phoenix, you have my personal phone number. If anything like this ever happens again, you call me immediately. I will, Robert. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your service. All of it, past, present, and future. As Admiral Hastings walked back to his sedan, the crowd began to disperse, but many veterans lingered to speak with Sarah. Word had already begun to spread beyond the VA office, and more people were arriving to see what the commotion was about. Kowalski stood alone near the building, watching the interaction between Sarah and the other veterans. His earlier arrogance had been completely replaced by shame and regret. Sarah noticed him standing alone and, after finishing her conversation with Rodriguez, walked over to where he waited. "Mr. Kowalski," she said quietly, "I accept your apology." He looked up at her with surprise and gratitude. "Ma'am, I don't deserve your forgiveness. What I did was inexcusable." "Maybe," Sarah agreed, "but holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. Learn from this. Do better next time." As the Admiral's sedan pulled out of the parking lot, Sarah Martinez stood in the afternoon sun, surrounded by fellow veterans who now understood exactly who they were talking to. The Navy Cross on her chest caught the light, but it was just one symbol of a lifetime of service that most people would never fully understand. The ordeal was over, but its impact would be felt for much longer than anyone realized. As the crowd began to disperse, several veterans approached Sarah with questions about her service. Word of the incident was spreading through social media, with videos of Admiral Hastings pinning the Navy Cross already going viral. Sarah found herself at the center of attention she had never sought and didn't particularly want. Corporal Rodriguez remained nearby, along with 3 other veterans who seemed hesitant to leave. An older man in a Vietnam veteran's cap stepped forward, his weathered hands shaking slightly as he extended one towards Sarah. "Ma'am, my name is Thomas Chun. I served in Vietnam, 1968 to 1970. I just wanted to say thank you." Sarah shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for your service, Thomas." Vietnam veterans paved the way for all of us who came after. Chin's eyes filled with tears. "When we came home, people called us baby killers, spat on us at airports. To see what happened to you today, to see how people doubted your service, it brought back a lot of memories." A younger woman stepped forward. "I'm Maria Santos, Army medic, serve in Iraq and Afghanistan. What that clerk did to you is wrong, but watching you handle it with such grace, it reminded me why I'm proud to have served." Sarah nodded to each veteran as they introduced themselves, but she could sense there was something more they wanted to say. The group had the look of people carrying heavy burdens, the telltale signs of warriors struggling with invisible wounds. "Is there something else on your minds?" Sarah asked gently. Rodriguez spoke up first. "Ma'am, how do you deal with people not understanding? Not just today, but every day. How do you live with what you've seen and done when nobody around you gets it?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Sarah recognized the pain behind it, the isolation that came with carrying memories too dark to share and experiences too intense for civilian comprehension. "Walk with me," Sarah said, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the parking lot. The small group followed her away from the remaining onlookers. "First thing you need to understand," Sarah began, her voice taking on the tone of someone who had given this speech before, "is that what happened today wasn't really about stolen valor. It was about invisible wounds and visible assumptions." She stopped walking and turned to face the group. "Each of you carries something from your service. Combat stress, survivor's guilt, moral injury, physical wounds. Most people can't see these things, so they make judgments based on what they think a veteran should look like." Maria Santos nodded vigorously. "Exactly. People expect us to either be broken and homeless or superhuman warriors. There's no middle ground for being a normal person who's been through abnormal things. The truth is," Sarah continued, "we're all carrying pieces of war inside us. Some days those pieces fit together okay. Other days they cut us from the inside out. But that's not weakness. That's the cost of doing the job we signed up for." Thomas Chun wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. 50 years later, I still wake up some nights thinking I'm back in the jungle. My wife tries to understand, but how can she? She's never had to shoot a kid who was pointing an AK-47 at her friends. The group fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own memories. Sarah recognized the look, the 1,000-yard stare that came with reliving moments best left buried. Thomas, Sarah said quietly, that kid made his choice when he picked up that weapon. You made yours when you protected your brothers. The weight you carry isn't from doing something wrong. It's from being human enough to feel the cost of doing something necessary. She looked around the group, making eye contact with each veteran. The problem isn't that we carry these memories. The problem is that we try to carry them alone. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. It's hard to talk about it with people who weren't there. They either treat you like you're broken or like you're some kind of hero. But you don't feel like either one. No, Sarah agreed. You feel like someone who did their job in the worst possible circumstances and lived to carry the weight of it. That's not broken, and it's not heroic. It's just reality. A new voice joined the conversation. Ma'am, excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing. The group turned to see Gerald Kowalski approaching hesitantly. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in the last hour, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Mr. Kowalski, Sarah said neutrally, what can I do for you? I wanted to apologize again, but more than that, I wanted to understand something. He paused, struggling with his words. I've been working at the VA for 15 years. I've seen thousands of veterans come through those doors, but I've never understood. I thought I knew what a warrior looked like. Sarah studied his face, seeing genuine confusion rather than malice. What did you think a warrior looked like, Gerald? Kowalski glanced around the group, nervously. Big, intimidating guys. Muscles and tattoos. Confident, aggressive. Not. He gestured helplessly towards Sarah. Not someone who looks like my sister. Maria Santos let out a bitter laugh. So female veterans don't count. No, that's not what I meant, Kowalski said quickly. I've never seen a woman who served in combat before. Yes, you have, Sarah said simply. You've seen dozens of them. You just didn't recognize them because they didn't match your preconceptions. She walked closer to Kowalski, her voice taking on an educational tone. Gerald, in my 12 years with DevGru, I served alongside female intelligence officers, pilots, medics, and support personnel who were just as brave as any male operator. Some of them died for this country. Some of them killed for it. Most of them came home and went back to being mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives who carry their service quietly. Thomas Chin spoke up. Son, I served with women in Vietnam who were braver than most of the men. Nurses who ran into enemy fire to save wounded soldiers. Intelligence officers who went behind enemy lines. But when they came home, nobody called them heroes. They just went back to their lives. Rodriguez nodded. In Afghanistan, one of our best forward observers was a woman, called in airstrikes that saved our entire platoon more than once. But she was 5'2" and looked like she should be teaching elementary school. Kowalski's face showed his growing understanding. I never thought about it that way. I guess I only paid attention to the obvious veterans, the ones who looked the part. That's the problem, Sarah said. War doesn't just take big, intimidating men. It takes anyone who's willing to serve. And when we come home, we don't all wear our service on our sleeves. Some of us just want to blend in and get on with our lives. A black pickup truck pulled into the parking lot, and a man in his 60s got out. He was tall and lean, with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of a career military officer. He scanned the group until his eyes found Sarah. Phoenix, he called out, striding across the parking lot. I heard what happened. Are you okay? Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time since the ordeal began. I'm Phoenix, Snake. Just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. The man reached the group and embraced Sarah warmly. Misunderstanding my ass. Someone thought you were faking being a SEAL? That's the dumbest thing I've heard since Congress tried to cut our budget. He turned to address the group, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. For those who don't know, I'm Command Master Chief Patrick O'Brien, retired. I served with Phoenix for 8 years. Saw her in action more times than I can count. Rodriguez stepped forward. Master Chief, Can you tell us what she was really like in combat? O'Brien's expression grew serious. That's classified, son. But I can tell you this. Phoenix was the kind of operator other operators looked up to. Cool under pressure, deadly accurate, and she never left anyone behind. Ever. He paused, looking at Sarah with obvious respect. The thing about Phoenix is that she never sought glory. While other operators were writing books and doing interviews, she was still in the field, still doing the job. She retired not because she got tired of fighting, but because she'd given everything she had to give. Kowalski spoke up hesitantly. Master Chief, sir, I'm the one who caused all this trouble. I accused her of stolen valor because she didn't look like what I thought a SEAL should look like. O'Brien studied Kowalski for a long moment. Son, let me tell you something about SEALs. We don't all look like the guys in the movies. Some of us are small and fast. Some of us are big and strong. Some of us are quiet and smart. The only thing we all have in common is that we get the job done, no matter what the cost. He gestured towards Sarah. Phoenix got the job done more times and in more ways than most people could imagine. She's earned the right to be treated with respect, whether she's in uniform or wearing a business suit. Maria Santos asked, Master Chief, what was it like working with female operators? Same as working with anyone else. O'Brien replied without hesitation. You're either qualified or you're not. You either pull your weight or you don't. Gender doesn't stop bullets, and it doesn't make missions any easier or harder. He looked directly at Santos. But I will say this, the women who made it through selection and serve in combat roles were some of the toughest people I ever met. They had to be twice as good to get half the recognition, and they knew it. Thomas Chin spoke up. It sounds like things have changed since my time. In Vietnam, women weren't supposed to be in combat roles, but they ended up there anyway. Times have changed, O'Brien agreed. But courage hasn't. Dedication hasn't. The willingness to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. That's the same no matter what generation you're from. A young reporter had approached the group, camera in hand. Excuse me, I'm with Channel 8 News. We heard about what happened here today. Can we get an interview? Sarah shook her head firmly. No interviews. This is a private matter between veterans. But, ma'am, this is a great story about stolen valor and how... No, Sarah repeated, her voice carrying the steel that had once commanded respect in the world's most dangerous places. You want a story? Here's your story. Veterans deserve respect and benefit of the doubt. End of story. O'Brien stepped between Sarah and the reporter. The lady said no. I suggest you respect that. The reporter backed off, but continued filming from a distance. Sarah noticed other media vehicles arriving in the parking lot. This is getting out of hand, she said quietly to O'Brien. Yeah, well, that's what happens when someone videos an Admiral pinning a Navy cross in a VA parking lot, O'Brien replied. You're about to become famous whether you like it or not. Rodriguez looked around nervously at the growing crowd of onlookers and media personnel. Ma'am, is this always what happens when your service gets recognized? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rodriguez, the best operations are the ones nobody ever hears about. The best operators are the ones who do their job and disappear. Today was the opposite of everything I've tried to do for the last 20 years. But maybe that's not such a bad thing, Maria Santos said thoughtfully. Maybe people need to see that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Maybe they need to understand that service isn't always visible. Maybe, Sarah conceded. But I didn't sign up to be anyone's poster child. I signed up to do a job. O'Brien put his hand on Sarah's shoulder. Phoenix, you've been doing that job for 20 years. Today, the job is showing people what a real warrior looks like. Whether you wanted it or not, that's the mission now. As if to emphasize his point, another group of veterans was approaching from a VA office. Word had spread inside the building, and people were coming out to see the woman who had been arrested for stolen valor, but turned out to be one of America's most decorated warriors. Sarah looked around at the growing crowd, the media vehicles, and the veterans who were looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. She realized that O'Brien was right. Whether she liked it or not, this had become something bigger than a simple misunderstanding. The question was what she would do with the platform that had been thrust upon her. For someone who had spent her career operating in shadows, standing in the spotlight felt more dangerous than any mission she had ever undertaken. But as she looked at the faces of the veterans around her, Rodriguez with his survivor's guilt, Santos with her invisible wounds, Chun with his decades of carrying Vietnam, Sarah began to understand that maybe this wasn't about her anymore. Maybe it was about all of them. 6 months after the incident at the VA office, Sarah Martinez sat in a conference room at the Pentagon, looking across the table at a group of senior military officials and civilian leaders. The meeting had been called to discuss a new initiative that had grown directly from the events of that difficult day in San Diego. Ms. Martinez, said General Patricia Morrison, Army Chief of Staff, the Invisible Warriors program you've proposed represents a fundamental shift in how we support our veterans. Can you walk us through the key components? Sarah opened her folder and pulled out a detailed proposal that had taken months to develop. The document represented countless hours of research, interviews with veterans, and collaboration with mental health professionals. The program addresses 3 critical areas, Sarah began, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had served her well in briefing rooms around the world. Recognition, support, and integration. Too many veterans, particularly those with invisible wounds or non-traditional service records, are falling through the cracks in our current system. She looked around the table, making eye contact with each official. What happened to me in San Diego happens to veterans every day. Maybe not as dramatically, but the underlying problem is the same. People don't recognize service when it doesn't match their preconceptions. Admiral Hastings, who had recommended Sarah for this position, nodded approvingly. Tell them about the pilot program results. We launched pilot programs in 5 cities, Sarah continued. San Diego, Atlanta, Denver, Phoenix, and Portland. Each program paired veterans who had experienced recognition issues with peer mentors who had similar service backgrounds. She pulled out a chart showing the statistics they had gathered. In 6 months, we've helped 847 veterans access benefits they were previously denied or discouraged from seeking. We've prevented 12 veteran suicides through our crisis intervention protocols. And we've trained 156 VA employees and first responders in recognition awareness. Colonel James Wright, Marine Corps representative, leaned forward. What about Gerald Kowalski? I understand he's been involved in the program. Sarah smiled slightly. Gerald has become one of our most effective advocates. He now trains other VA employees on recognizing diverse veterans and avoiding the assumptions that led to my situation. His personal experience makes him uniquely qualified to help others understand these issues. Speaking of diverse veterans, said Dr. Rebecca Foster, Undersecretary of Veterans Affairs, how has the program addressed the specific challenges faced by female veterans? That's been a major focus, Sarah replied. Female veterans are 40% more likely to have their service questioned or minimized. They're also more likely to suffer from military sexual trauma, which affects how they present themselves in civilian settings. Our female peer mentors have been particularly effective in helping other women navigate these challenges. She pulled out another document. We've also partnered with veteran service organizations to create safe spaces specifically for women veterans. Places where they can talk about their experiences without judgment or the need to prove their legitimacy. General Morrison studied the proposal. The budget request is substantial. Can you justify the cost? General, the current cost of veteran suicide, homelessness, and underutilization of benefits far exceeds what we're proposing to spend on prevention and support, Sarah answered. We're not asking for more money. We're asking to spend existing money more effectively. She stood and walked to a whiteboard at the front of the room. Current system, veterans struggle to access benefits, become frustrated, develop mental health issues, require expensive emergency interventions. Our system, early identification, peer support, preventive care, better outcomes at lower cost. Admiral Hastings spoke up. Sarah, tell them about Corporal Rodriguez. Sarah's expression warmed. Danny Rodriguez was the young Marine who witnessed my arrest. He was struggling with survivor's guilt and considering suicide. Through our program, he's now a peer mentor himself, helping other combat veterans deal with trauma. He's also enrolled in college and working toward a degree in social work. That's one success story, Colonel Wright observed. What about broader impact? We've documented significant improvements across all metrics, Sarah replied, returning to her seat. Veteran satisfaction with VA services is up 23% in pilot locations. Time to benefit approval has decreased by an average of 18 days. Most importantly, veteran trust in the system is increasing. Dr. Foster examined the detailed statistics Sarah had provided. These numbers are impressive, but how do we scale this nationally without losing effectiveness? That's where technology comes in, Sarah explained. We've developed an app called VetConnect that allows veterans to access peer mentors, verify their service records, and get real-time assistance with benefit applications. The app also trains service providers to recognize diverse veterans. She pulled out her phone and opened the app. Veterans can upload their service records, get them verified through military databases, and receive a digital certificate that prevents the kind of situation I experienced. Service providers can scan the certificate and immediately access relevant information about the veteran's service history and needs. General Morrison looked intrigued. What about security? Military service records contain sensitive information. All data is encrypted and stored on secure military servers, Sarah answered. Veterans control what information is shared and with whom. The system is designed to provide verification without compromising operational security or personal privacy. Admiral Hastings added, "We've tested the system extensively with both active duty personnel and veterans. Security protocols exceed DoD standards for classified information systems." There's another component to consider, Sarah continued. Public education. Part of the reason these recognition problems occur is that civilians don't understand the diversity of modern military service. We're proposing a public awareness campaign that highlights the real faces of veterans. She showed them a series of promotional materials featuring real veterans from different backgrounds, services, and roles. Instead of perpetuating stereotypes about what veterans look like, we show the reality. Teachers, nurses, business owners, students, parents, people who serve their country and then return to serve their communities. Colonel Wright studied the materials. This could be controversial. Some veterans prefer to keep their service private. Absolutely, Sarah agreed. Participation is completely voluntary. But we found that many veterans want to share their stories once they realize it might help others avoid discrimination or recognition issues. Dr. Foster looked up from the budget documents. Ms. Martinez, this program seems very personal for you. How do we ensure it remains objective and effective if it expands nationally? Sarah had expected this question and had prepared for it carefully. Dr. Foster, you're right that this is personal, but every veteran's experience is personal. The difference is that some of us have the platform and the skills to turn personal experiences into systemic solutions. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I didn't create this program because I'm angry about what happened to me. I created it because what happened to me happens to thousands of veterans every year, and most of them don't have an admiral to call for verification. General Morrison nodded slowly. The metrics you've provided suggest the program is effective. What do you need from us to move forward? 3 things, Sarah replied. Official DoD endorsement of the program, integration with existing VA systems, and commitment to national rollout over the next 18 months. She pulled out a timeline chart. Phase 1, complete rollout in 25 major metropolitan areas. Phase 2, integration with smaller VA facilities and rural areas. Phase 3, full national implementation with ongoing evaluation and improvement. Admiral Hastings leaned back in his chair. I've reviewed the program extensively. It's sound, it's needed, and it's cost-effective. Sarah has done exceptional work developing this from concept to implementation. What about resistance? Colonel Wright asked. Some VA employees might resist being retrained, especially if they think they're being criticized. Sarah smiled. That's where Gerald Kowalski comes in. When training is delivered by someone who made these mistakes and learned from them, It's much more effective than having it come from headquarters. We're not criticizing anyone. We're helping them do their jobs better. Dr. Foster closed her copy of the proposal. Ms. Martinez, assuming we approve this program, would you be willing to lead the national implementation? Sarah had been expecting this question as well, and her answer surprised some people in the room. Dr. Foster, I appreciate the confidence, but I think the program should be led by veterans who are still building their careers. I'll serve as an advisor, but the day-to-day leadership should come from people like Corporal Rodriguez and others who represent the next generation of veteran advocates. General Morrison raised an eyebrow. You're turning down a senior executive position? I'm ensuring the program has the leadership it needs to succeed long-term, Sarah replied. I've had my turn in leadership roles. Now it's time for others to step up and make their mark. The meeting continued for another hour with detailed discussions about implementation timelines, budget allocations, and performance metrics. By the end, it was clear that the Invisible Warriors program would receive full support for national rollout. As the officials filed out of the conference room, Admiral Hastings remained behind with Sarah. Phoenix, you continue to impress me, he said. Most people would have used this situation to advance their own careers. Instead, you're using it to help others. Sarah gathered her materials and stood to leave. Robert, I've spent 20 years serving my country. This is just a different kind of mission. What's next for you then? If you're not going to run this program, what are your plans? Sarah looked out the window at the Pentagon parking lot, where she could see veterans coming and going from various meetings and appointments. Many of them carried invisible wounds and fought daily battles that no one else could see. I'm going back to school, she said finally. Social work degree. I want to work with veterans who are struggling with the transition from military to civilian life. The kind of work that doesn't make headlines, but changes individual lives. Admiral Hastings smiled. Once a SEAL, always a SEAL. You're still serving, just in a different way. That's the only way I know how to live, Sarah replied. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez sat in a small office in downtown San Diego, across the desk from a young veteran who was struggling with addiction and homelessness. The office was part of a community center that served veterans of all backgrounds and eras. The veteran, a former Army medic named Jennifer Walsh, was telling Sarah about her experiences trying to access VA benefits after returning from deployment in Africa. They kept asking me about combat injuries, Jennifer explained, her voice shaking slightly. But my trauma wasn't from enemy fire. It was from watching children die from diseases I could have prevented if we'd had better supplies. They didn't seem to think that counted as real trauma. Sarah nodded, understanding completely. Jennifer, trauma is trauma. The source doesn't matter. What matters is how it's affecting you now and what we can do to help you heal. She pulled out a tablet and opened the VetConnect app. Let's get your service record verified and uploaded. That will prevent anyone from questioning your eligibility for services. As I worked through the app, Jennifer asked, Ms. Martinez, how did you know to create this program? Did something happen to you? Sarah looked up from the tablet and smiled. Something happened to a lot of us, Jennifer. The difference is that some of us had the resources to do something about it. Through the window of the community center, Sarah could see other veterans arriving for various programs: job training, family counseling, educational support. Many of them were people whose service would never be obvious to casual observers. Former intelligence officers who looked like suburban mothers, ex-special forces operators who worked as teachers, Navy pilots who had become nurses, all of them carrying their service quietly, professionally, with the dignity that had defined their military careers. All of them deserving recognition and respect, whether they wore their service on their sleeves or carried it silently in their hearts. The incident at the VA office had lasted only a few hours, but its impact would be felt for generations. Not because of the humiliation Sarah had endured, but because of the systematic change it had sparked. Veterans across the country were now receiving better care, faster service, and greater recognition for their sacrifices. The Invisible Warriors program had become a model for other nations, and the VetConnect app was being adapted for use by military communities worldwide. But for Sarah Martinez, the real victory wasn't in the programs or the recognition or the national attention. It was in moments like this one, sitting across from a struggling veteran and helping them find the support they needed to rebuild their lives. It was in the knowledge that Gerald Kowalski now treated every veteran with the respect they deserved, regardless of how they looked or what assumptions he might have made in the past. It was in watching Danny Rodriguez grow from a young Marine, carrying survivors' guilt into a confident peer mentor, helping others navigate their own struggles. It was in the hundreds of veterans who no longer had to prove their service to skeptical clerks or suspicious officials, because the system now worked the way it was supposed to work. Sarah Martinez had spent 12 years serving her country in the shadows, fighting battles that most people would never know about. But perhaps her greatest victory had happened in broad daylight, in a VA parking lot in San Diego, when she chose to transform humiliation into hope and injustice into lasting change. The legend wasn't just about her service record or her decorations or the operations she had completed in faraway places. The legend was about what she had done after the handcuffs came off, when she could have simply walked away, but chose instead to stay and fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. In the end, that was the most Sarah Martinez thing of all, turning her moment of greatest vulnerability into a victory for every veteran who had ever felt invisible, overlooked, or forgotten. As Jennifer Walsh uploaded her service verification and smiled for the first time in months, Sarah realized that some battles were worth fighting not for glory or recognition, but simply because they needed to be fought. And sometimes the most important missions were the ones that happened after you came home.